Okay, so today we're looking at 5180 and we're looking at the twists that are called knots in the pattern themselves. So I don't know which you'll find easiest to see. It's basically the same thing on both garments, but it's these big chunky twists you've got there. So today we're going to look at how to work those. It is worked in a chunky yarn, so I have picked a nice chunky yarn that's fairly smooth so that you can see it quite clearly. You'll need 2 balls for this, and because it's quite a big chunky cardigan, that won't be a problem. Just allocate 1 ball. I've just taken a small amount of yarn here so that I can do the little extras for the twists. So that's part of what we need. And you'll also need a cable needle and got them twisted, and 2 stitch holders. These are just some that I keep here. Use whichever ones you've got. I've found smaller ones are better if you've got them. If you haven't and you've got larger ones, don't worry, or if you want to use fairly chunky safety pins, you can as well. So I'm going to need those shortly. Let's put these all to one side. Right, I have already worked one on a small sample, and that's just so you can see where we're coming from on this. So that's what we're going to create, and we're going to do that here. So on the pattern, you have quite a few rows of work. I think it's 15 rows between each of these. So you've got quite a distance. Okay. So the stitches at the side, you'll have different depending on what size you're working. I've just popped a few on at the edge, so I'm just going to purl across those, and you only ever purl or knit depending on which side you're working on. So I'm just going to do the purl across to the first part of the twist. Okay, so that's got me to where I need to be. Now for this, at this point, you get your other ball of yarn or your new ball of yarn, and you start to knit. So I am first of all going to knit, making sure I get the working piece of yarn. This is 5 stitches. So from that point there, you can see that's where my original yarn stops and my alternative yarn has started. And then you turn round, because for the next few moments we're going to work purely on these 5 stitches. Now you purl across the 5. I'm slightly twisted. And you can just give that a bit of a tug. We're going to sew these ends in later. Sorry. So that's the purl one. So you are doing purl 5, knit 5, 6 times. So that's 12 rows in total. So that's the first 2. And you keep turning each time. So you're actually creating a little extra strip. Of work. Now I'm just going to cut at this point, and then we'll come back when I've worked all the rows so that you can see the next bit. Right, so we're back with this. I have knit this little strip, and it's 14 rows of knitting, and you do end with a purl row. Now at this point I've decided it's best to cut the extra yarn. So it's your choice. You can leave a loop at the back to sew in later, but I like to cut it. So that bit is complete, and it's now going on to the stitch holder, which may seem a little bit faffy, but you will understand why later. So I'm just going to leave that dangling at the front of the work. Now the next 5 stitches you slip onto a cable needle, and I've picked one with a little kink in it just because I'm hoping it will hold on a bit better, and also I'm sure somebody will be cringing at this point, but I'm just going to hook them into the back of the original work just so that it doesn't start flying off and I end up with no stitches on the needle, because it can happen. And then I'm going to rejoin the yarn, just as with the other one, rejoin the yarn and start doing the knit 5, purl 5. So that's the first lot. It does feel a little bit messy and like there's a lot of things going on at the moment, but this is definitely not an easy knit pattern. It is for the slightly more advanced, intermediate or advanced knitter, or somebody who likes a challenge. So, okay. And you can pull that initial thread just to tighten your stitch, because it will stretch while you're working this bit, but we can tidy that up later. So don't get too worried about that right now. So I'm going to carry on with the knit 5, purl 5 until I've got the strip of the length that I need. But basically at the moment you'll have this one here. You will have your cable needle tagged in at the back, hopefully keeping hold of all your stitches. And then you'll be starting to work your next strip. So we'll come back to that in a moment when I've worked the strip. Okay, so I've now worked 14 stocking stitch rows on this section, and I'm going to do as with the other section. I'm going to cut the yarn off, and then I'm going to slip these 5 stitches onto a stitch holder. Okay, so what you should have now in front of you are 2 little knitted sections of the same length, and hidden behind is the cable needle. So I don't know if it's easier to see that way, but I'm going to have to turn it over in a minute. So that's what you've got from the back. Cable needle, 2 lengths, and your needle stitches either side. You also have your original yarn still attached to the first few stitches. Okay. Right. This next bit is the tricky one. So, on the instructions, you put the second strip underneath the first strip, then you bring it over and literally you're tying a knot, so that needs to go under there, which looks a bit crazy, I have to say, but it works. Then you also need to make sure that your knitting is the right way round. So you can see how the stocking stitch is face up there, and it will be face up here as well. And then what I have decided is the easiest thing to do is then to slip these stitches. Well, it's what you do have to do, but definitely easier. Slip your stitches back onto your original needle. Now, do feel free to replay that knotting technique, because that is definitely the key to it. So the second strip goes underneath the first strip, and then over the first strip to do this knot effect. Okay, so I've got those 5 there, and I'm also going to take these 5 off, being very careful not to lose stitches off the cable needle at the back. I do recommend very possibly using a table like I'm doing to start with. You may get more fluent with them and more confident after you've done a few. Okay, so now you get your original yarn, and I like to pull that one a little bit tight there, and you knit across them. Don't worry if they stretch a little bit. So your 5 stitches are now back with your original ones. Then, very carefully, find this one. Okay, and we're going to purl them off the cable needle. because we need to keep that reverse stocking stitch going up the middle. So I've purled them. Then take this other needle, and we'll get rid of that in a second, don't worry, it'll just thread through. Knit across the 5, and then you purl to the end of the row. So you've got quite a big lump here now. It does settle down as you go further up. So what you have, if you've got any pieces that are poking out at the front, just take them through to the back. That's it. So you've got 2 tails from one side there, and you should have the 2 tails from the other side here. You will sew them in a little while. I did sew in the ones from the bottom. You can see how neat you can do it. So I just sewed it in up either side here. And I would recommend doing some sewing up as you're going along with that. Otherwise, you'll have loads of little ends. So you've got your original where you're purling up to your centre 15. I've now knit across those, purl across the centre 5, and then knit the other, and then purl to the end. When you turn round and work back across your row, you knit across your first set of stitches, and then you'll work every reverse side row the same. You'll purl 5, knit 5, purl 5, and then knit to the end of the row. Depending on which panel you're on, that may be slightly different towards the end because there is a border knitting with this. So hopefully you find that useful. It is a little bit fiddly. Do just spend a little bit of time getting your twists right, because you don't want to get partway up your work and find that you've done a twist in the wrong direction. So I would say at this point, double check that your twists look the same, and that way you'll be fine with that one. But hopefully you have found that helpful, and obviously you can stop and start it as you need to look at the different bits again and again. But hopefully that's sorted out any little problems you've got. Thanks, and see you in the next one.